Hi, I'm Libby Cornish from Decadent Alternatives. Welcome to my online gluten-free baking classes. In this video, I'm going to talk about how often you should feed Arthur, my sourdough culture. Some of you will have received your little goodie pack. You'll know how much you should actually feed Arthur, but you don't know actually how often you should feed him. So it really is going to come down to how often you want to make a loaf of sourdough bread, how often you make the bread. So for some of my customers, they make 3 or 4 loaves a week. Some will make 1 loaf every 2 weeks. So it's going to be a very individualized thing in terms of how often you actually feed Arthur. So if you are making a loaf of sourdough, say once every 2 weeks, then I would feed it basically feed Arthur, or whatever you call your sourdough culture when you receive it, that feed it once a fortnight. And basically and then leave it in the fridge. So take 50 grams out, feed it, so that you get your 200 grams of culture. Use 150 grams of that to make your loaf of bread, and put the other 50 grams back into the fridge. If you only sporadically make sourdough breads, and so that might be once a month or once every 2 months, I'd say basically feed your sourdough culture every minimum of every month. Ensure that you actually put the date, so that you're keeping it in a glass jar or a container. Make sure that you put the date on it so that you can go, okay, I need to feed it. Or even if you mark it on your calendar. There's been times when I have been a little distracted and have forgotten to feed Arthur, and it's been maybe 3 or 4 months, and there was very minimal activity. So now I ensure that it's at least once every 2 months I will feed Arthur. Also, the amount that you're going to want to feed is really dependent on the number of loaves of bread that you are actually going to use or make. So if you are thinking, I'm going to have a big baking weekend and make 4 loaves of bread that I can slice and freeze away, then it means that you are going to actually need, so feed Arthur, so he'll go from 50 grams to 200 grams in the first feed. Then you are going to need, if you're making 4 loaves, you will need 150 times by 4, which is 600 grams of Arthur. So basically you'll probably just quadruple the feed. So in that second feed, the first feed, you're just doing the 50 and it goes up to 200 grams of Arthur. Take the whole lot of that and feed it again, say the next day. Now, in terms of where you leave Arthur, if you're going to feed him and then want to use him, that is really going to depend on the flavor of the sourdough that you want. So if I want a not a very sour loaf, I will feed out Arthur during the day. I will, or I'll feed him overnight. I will then use some of that overnight feed that's been left at room temperature to use in a loaf of bread, for a sourdough bread. The other thing that you could do is then use that overnight culture to feed again, and then use some of that the next day, and only do a 3-hour proving, and you'll have a very light flavored sourdough. If you want a strong sourdough, then use some of your culture from the fridge straight, and that will be, and do an overnight proving at a low temperature, and that will actually be quite sour. But it is so everyone has individual tastes, so how you want your bread to taste like, you'll work it out. The first couple of loaves you might say, oh, that's a bit too sour for me, and then you can go, okay, well, I'll feed my sourdough culture and then I'll use it at this stage. Anyway, enjoy, and thank you for listening. Bye.